Assalamu alaikum. Recently, Greek Archbishop Ieronymos II made a controversial statement about Islam being a political ideology and not a religion. I don't speak Greek, so I'm relying on the accuracy of the English translations that were done by various news media outlets that reported this story. Let's watch this very short clip.
Διότι όπως ξέρουμε το Ισλάμ, οι πολίτες του δεν είναι θρησκεία, είναι πολιτικό κόμμα, είναι πολιτική επιδίωξη και είναι οι άνθρωποι του πολέμου, οι άνθρωποι της εξαπλώσεως. Αυτό είναι χαρακτηριστικό του Ισλάμ.
After receiving criticism for these comments, Archbishop Ieronymos, it sounds kind of like IERA, the Islamic Education and Research Academy based in the UK, which was also founded by a Greek brother. Anyways, Mr. Ieronymos II did the usual PR damage control cop-out thingy by saying, oh, my comments were misunderstood. I didn't mean Islam. I meant like political Islam. I meant the radical Islamists who have perverted the beautiful religion of Islam into a political ideology. Before responding to this allegation that Islam is just a political system or just a political ideology and not a religion, I want to move away from Mr. Ieronymos for just a second and make a general comment here. A lot of people who are anti-Islam, especially those who are in the public light, like politicians, they've learned this simple lesson really, really well, which is that you can say whatever negative thing, whatever garbage, even whatever hateful comments you want to say against Islam and Muslims, but you just have to change the word Islam to radical Islamism. And of course, you have to change the word Muslims to radical Islamists. The term used to be fundamentalist Islam back in the 90s, but now Islamism or radical Islamism is the one to use. So just by making this small adjustment, just adding 3 letters, ism, from Islam to Islamism, you can now continue to say whatever it was that you wanted to say against Islam. It's deceptive, but it's a simple and ingenious method that people can use. Using this method of deception and dissimulation, such anti-Islam people can now say whatever hateful things they want to say. Here's some examples of how this bait and switch tactic works. Now, if you're a complete novice Islamophobe, you could say this: Islam preaches violence and terrorism. But that doesn't sound good. So you have to scratch out that word Islam and say Islamism preaches violence and terrorism. Now that's good to go. You could say Islam should be banned in France, but you're not going to get very far saying that. And your political career might even take a nosedive. So instead you can say Islamism or radical Islamism should be banned in France. Now everyone's going to agree with you, never mind what you mean by Islamism. You could say Muslim immigrants should be deported, but that sounds a bit too extreme, even to some people who might be xenophobic. If you just change your statement to radical Islamists should be deported, now you're going to get a lot of agreement. Even some confused or whitewashed Muslims will probably join the bandwagon and agree with you. Never mind if by radical Islamists all you mean is someone who walks to the mosque to pray 5 times a day, or a lady that wants to wear her hijab head covering at work. Again, if you're a complete beginner or novice at Islamophobia, you could say something like Walmart shouldn't hire Muslims in hijab, but then you risk being called something like racist. So just modify that statement and say Walmart shouldn't hire Islamists in hijabs, and now you're good to go. It's deceptive, yeah. It's simple, yeah, but it's an ingenious method. And yeah, of course, it's a great political move. Now, in his public statement, again, if we can rely on the accuracy of the English translation, Mr. Ieronymos didn't even bother to make this very simple distinction. He simply just said Islam and Muslims. Now, just to clarify, Islam does have a political component to it. We're not denying that. Islam does have political implications or political aspects to it. We're not ashamed of that. We're not ashamed of the fact that in the 7th century Arabia, The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam made certain prophecies that had political aspects to them. He said that his spiritual community of Muslims would one day conquer Constantinople, would one day conquer Byzantium. We're not ashamed or apologetic for the fact that Sultan Mehmed al-Fatih of the Ottomans fulfilled that prophecy in the year 1453 when he conquered Constantinople for Islam. Even if the fulfillment of many of the Prophet's prophecies worked to the disadvantage of the Greek Orthodox Church, we as Muslims are not ashamed of those prophecies being fulfilled. Now, if that sounds aggressive or militant or extremist, I want you to consider the fact that it's highly unlikely that the Greek Orthodox Church, if given an opportunity, would apologize to the ancient Greek pagans whose temples they forcibly confiscated, razed, destroyed, and burnt down. This happened under the watch of early Christian Roman emperors that today's Catholic Church consider to have been Catholic emperors and today's Orthodox Christians consider to have been Orthodox Christians. The very Hagia Sophia Mosque, whose loss you lament because it was once a Byzantine church in Constantinople, that very same Hagia Sophia church, when it was a church, was built from stones and pillars that were confiscated from destroyed Greek pagan temples. 8 of the columns in the Hagia Sophia church, now mosque, were taken from the temple of Artemis in Ephesus. A large number of other churches and buildings built in Constantinople under the watch of Orthodox Christian emperors were also made from stones and pillars that were taken from confiscated or destroyed Greek pagan temples. I'm not saying this because I'm a Muslim or because I hate Greeks or anything like that. This is mainstream Christian history. We just have to read and we have to study. So, for example, in this edition that I have of The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire by Edward Gibbon, this is a classic, a seminal work of Roman and Christian and Western history. In chapter 21, on page 446 of my edition, it reads, Constantine discharged the duties of a Roman censor when he gave orders for the demolition of several temples of Phoenicia, in which every mode of prostitution was devoutly practiced in the face of day and to the honor of Venus. The imperial city of Constantinople was, in some measure, raised at the expense and was adorned with the spoils of the opulent temples of Greece and Asia. So this was all done under the watch of the Christian Emperor Constantine. Now, if you're some kind of Protestant Christian, you can just say, well, I don't believe in Constantine. Constantine is not Jesus. Constantine has nothing to do with Christianity. In fact, Christianity got corrupted once it assumed state or political power. You could maybe say that if you're a Protestant Christian. But if you're a Roman Catholic or if you're an Orthodox Christian, it's going to be more difficult for you to say that because the Greek Orthodox Church officially recognizes Constantine as a saint, not just as a Christian, but as a saint. Let me share another example from Edward Gibbon's book. In chapter 23, he talks about the building of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, one of the most holy sites in Christianity, and a site, by the way, which has been under Muslim control for most of its existence, so under the control and the maintenance and protection of Muslims. On page 480 of this abridged edition, Gibbon talks about how that church was made. So the Emperor Constantine sent his mother Helena on a fact-finding mission, on a research mission to Jerusalem. And she supposedly discovered through her research that where the temple of Venus currently stood at that time, that was apparently the site where Jesus was born, and that's where the Church of the Holy Sepulchre would now be made. Gibbon writes, the profane chapel of Venus was demolished by the order of Constantine, and the removal of the earthen stones revealed the Holy Sepulchre to the eyes of mankind. A magnificent church was erected on that mystic ground by the first emperor, and the effects of his pious munificence were extended to every spot which had been consecrated by the footsteps of patriarchs, of prophets, and of the Son of God. I wonder how many other pagan temples or holy sites had to be removed or demolished in order for those churches to be made. By the way, Helena, the mother of Constantine, is also officially recognized as a saint by the Greek Orthodox Church. So there are many, many such examples that you can find throughout history. Just ask yourself, how many temples are there today in Greece or in the former Roman Empire domains that are dedicated to the worship of Diana or Venus or Hercules or Zeus? In fact, that probably would have been impossible until just about 50 or 60 years ago, when some pagans came back up to the fore, and now there might be a couple of sites now in Greece in which the ancient Greek gods are worshipped. On pages 486 and 487, there's another example of what was once one of the greatest temples of the pagan world. This was the temple of Daphne, which was about 5-6 kilometers away from Antioch in present-day Turkey. And this temple, the Temple of Daphne, had also been destroyed and replaced by a church. Anyways, there's many such examples, and hopefully most of you know this. This is not restricted in any way to the Greek Orthodox Church. This applies to all of the other church denominations as well, all of the classic or ancient church denominations. So the Catholics did this as well too. This is a very well-known phenomenon in South America. And also, just to be clear, we can't say that, all of these pagans, they just, converted happily to Christianity, and these Greek temples, these Greek pagan temples were only destroyed after paganism had died out. That is not the case. So with the Temple of Daphne, for example, Edward Gibbon makes it very clear that there were still pagans who were there. And one of the ways that we know that is because Julian the Apostate, who was a pagan Roman emperor, he restored many of these pagan sites of worship. So he did the opposite, and he broke down those churches and restored those places as pagan temples. Theodosius was another early Christian Roman emperor who basically declared all-out war against the pagans of the Roman Empire. He destroyed almost all of the pagan temples in Syria, in Gaza, many in Egypt. And again, Theodosius is considered to have been an Orthodox Christian by the various Eastern Orthodox churches, and he's officially recognized as a saint by the Greek Orthodox Church. Theodosius II, his son who continued his father's work, is also considered a saint by the Orthodox Church. During the time of Theodosius II, however, there probably weren't many pagans left to persecute and kill, so he now turned his attention to fellow Christians, towards Christian heretics like the Monophysites. So to me, and to people who know history much better than me, this kind of playing the victim card by Greek Orthodox Christians, it comes across as disingenuous. Oh, we're this pious, spiritual, otherworldly church that is not concerned with politics, that is not concerned with control or power. This is historically not the case. Mr. Ieronymos, the Archbishop of Greece, is actually a very, very educated man. So I am sure that he knows all of this. In fact, he knows all of this in far more detail than me. So please get past 1453. Get past the fact that you got muscled out of Constantinople. It's gone. I'm sure Mr. Ieronymos also knows very well that his particular church's history is very, very tied up with Roman and Byzantine political history. See, you can be a Muslim, you can even be a pious Muslim and not like the Ottoman Empire. I can be a Muslim and I don't have to like Sultan Mehmed or Sultan Abdul Hamid II or whatnot. But the question for the other side is, and this is a genuine question, is can you be a pious Greek Orthodox believer and not love the Byzantine Empire? Can you be a pious Greek Orthodox believer and not like the political Emperor Constantine and Theodosius and Constantine's mother Helena and Theodosius II, who are all officially recognized as saints by your church? Even in a modern contemporary context, the Greek Orthodox Church is very tied up with politics, with the political state of Greece. And although there are Greek Orthodox believers outside of Greece, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that probably about 99% of Greek Orthodox believers are ethnic Greeks. So can you be a true believer in your church and not like the modern political state of Greece, not support the modern political state of Greece? I don't know. In any event, Mr. Ieronymos has acknowledged the role of religion and the role specifically of his Greek Orthodox Church in modern politics. So he's not some completely secular guy, as most modern people or as many modern people understand the term secularism. Nor should he be. I mean, every faith, if it's a true, living, dynamic faith, it must have some implications for your social and your political behavior. It can't just be about how you worship on one day of the week in a temple or a church or a mosque. It has to have implications for your life overall, and that can include your social and your political life. In this recent article in the Orthodox Times, Mr. Ieronymos is quoted as saying, in regards to the Greek Revolution of 1821, every signal of revolution was initiated by a monastery and a clergyman. So he's referencing this fact of history obviously in a positive sense. He's endorsing this. He's owning this. He's not saying that this was wrong. Now, sure, he's not saying that the Greek Orthodox priests have to assume direct political state control and implement the 10 Commandments on a political level or something like that. But he's acknowledging that true religion, for him, his religion has to have some social and political dimensions and implications as well. So if him recognizing this about the Greek Orthodox Church does not reduce Greek Orthodox Christianity to just a political system, to just a political ideology, then we should understand the same thing for Islam as well. Islam is a religion that can have political implications and dimensions, but that does not mean that we should reduce Islam to just a political system or a political ideology, because it is much more than that in the hearts of its hundreds of millions of followers on this earth. Okay, let's move on from Mr. Ieronymos, who said that he was misunderstood. On some level, he retracted or modified his statements. Look, he's 82 years old. He's elderly. He's just recovered from COVID. People can be forgetful, and sometimes people can lapse or not think clearly in the words that they choose. It happens to me all the time. The truth is that Mr. Ieronymos is not the first, and unfortunately, he is not the last person that is going to make this allegation against Islam, i.e., that Islam is not a religion. It's just a political ideology. In fact, to be fair, it's not even usually Greek Orthodox priests that we hear this from. It's not usually guys with long beards and long robes and long names that we hear these kinds of allegations from. Rather, it's usually the American Daves and Sams and Bills that we hear this slogan repeated by. And there's a very important reason for that, by the way. There's a very important reason that it's American Islamophobes or Americans who hate Islam who are spearheading this movement to paint Islam as just a political ideology. And the reason for that is that due to various historical reasons, the idea of the freedom of religion is very, very deeply entrenched in American culture, in American politics, and in the American Constitution. So if you live in America, if you're an American and you hate Islam, how do you shut Islam down? You can't. If you're an American and you hate American Muslims, how do you shut American Muslims down? You can't. Even most of those Americans who might think Muslims worship a black stone in Mecca or worship a moon god, even they wouldn't want the freedom of religion taken away from Muslims, because that is part of who America is. The average American believes that religious beliefs, no matter how unpalatable to them, no matter how unpleasant, must be safeguarded and protected as a constitutional right. This has a lot to do with the fact that many of the pioneers who came to America from Europe were in fact fleeing religious persecution in Europe. So this idea of freedom religion was very, very quickly extended to other groups like Catholic, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, and others. So you can't shut Islam down unless you can show that Islam is not a religion. Unless you can convince people that Islam is in fact not a religion, it's a political system. Because now that's a different story. The safeguarding and protection of everyone's religious rights is one thing, but there's no such thing as the freedom to whatever political ideology you believe in or want to implement. So Muslims, I want you to understand that this is not just some kind of cheap polemic that we should laugh off or shrug off or ignore. It's actually linked up with a much more nefarious political agenda to try to curtail, if not outright ban, to at least curtail the rights, the civil liberties of Muslims in America. I hope you understand the game that's being played here. I hope you understand what's going on simply by changing the label of Islam to Islamism or Muslims to radical Islamists. Now, I don't only want to be the bearer of bad news. As Muslims, we should always be optimistic. We should always be hopeful. I am very optimistic and hopeful that if we care, we can very easily dispel this misconception of Islam not being a religion, but being a political ideology. This simple method that we can use to dispel this misconception is so easy that anyone can do it. We lay Muslims can do it. I can do it. You can do it. Children can even do it if they attend something like a Saturday morning madrasa or something like that. And here is that simple method. The method is all you have to do is explain the basics of Islam. All you have to do is to explain what you believe. So more specifically, the 6 articles of faith and the 5 pillars of Islam. Now, how is that going to dispel or crush this misconception that Islam is not a religion? Very simple. I'm going to show you how. So what we do is we go through the 6 articles of faith, and you just explain to this person that you're talking to that the first article is to believe in the oneness of God. And then you ask them, is belief in the oneness of God a political belief, a political action, or is it a religious belief? Well, obviously, it is a religious belief. So now you know where I'm going with this. It's all in the presentation, folks. All right. The second article of faith is to believe in the angels. So you ask the person that you're talking to, do you think believing in angels is a political belief? Do you think it's a political action? Or is it a religious belief about the metaphysical, about the supernatural? Well, obviously, it is the latter, not the former. Number 3, Muslims must believe in all of the books or revelations or scriptures that God sent down. So specifically, Muslims must believe that God gave a revelation to the prophet David, to the prophet Abraham. God gave a revelation called the Torah to the prophet Moses. God gave a revelation called the Injil to the prophet Jesus. And God revealed the words of the Quran to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Does believing these things qualify as a political belief? Is it a political action? Or is it a religious belief? See, if you don't follow up the point by asking this question, then it's not going to be as effective. Number 4, to believe in all of the prophets of God. Is that a political belief? Is it a political action? No, it's not. Number 5, to believe in the day of judgment, Yawm al-Akhir. So is that a political belief, a political action, or is it a religious belief or a spiritual belief? The idea that we will be physically and spiritually resurrected and judged by our Maker. And the 6th one is Qadr, which I've purposely left untranslated. However you want to translate that, as the decree, the ordainment, the predestination, fate, or just the foreknowledge of God. However you translate that, the point is that is it a political belief? Does it have anything to do with political ideology? No, it does not. It is a belief about the supernatural. It is a belief about the metaphysical world or about metaphysical reality. So using these 6 articles of faith, we would be able to show that Islam is primarily, in its essence, it is a religious faith. It is a religion. Oh, by the way, here's a little tip for you. If you don't know the order of these 6 articles of faith, or if you want to teach them to kids in your family, there's a very simple kind of memory technique or memory device that I use to learn this, which is that God sent the angels with revelations, which they gave to the prophets, so that they would warn their people about the day of judgment. Okay, and then the 6th one after that is Qadr, or the decree of God. So that's an easy way of remembering the order of the 6 articles of faith. Let's move on now to the 5 pillars of Islam. Okay, so the first pillar of Islam is the Shahada, the testification of faith, to declare publicly, to declare verbally with your tongue La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, that there is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the messenger. So by declaring this, is this a political act? What is it in essence? In essence, it is a declaration of my belief. There is nothing intrinsically political about that statement. The second pillar of Islam is the Salah, the 5 daily prayers. Again, there's nothing intrinsically political about that. Now, I want to be a little bit imaginative or creative. The other side might say, well, you see, they line up and that's teaching you military discipline or something like that. Again, there is nothing intrinsically political about praying 5 times a day. The old man has to pray. Young children have to pray. Women have to pray. Pregnant women have to pray. They are not praying because they are preparing for war. They are praying because they are reconnecting with their Creator. And yes, throughout Muslim history, I'm sure that there are revolutions and there are rebellions and military coups that have probably been talked about and plotted in mosques, just like revolutions have been plotted in churches, just like revolutions have been plotted in pagan temples and in Hindu temples. But again, there is nothing intrinsically political about rubbing your nose in the ground and worshiping your Maker and your Creator and praising Him and thanking Him 5 times a day. The third pillar of Islam is the zakah, which is the almsgiving, for lack of a better term, or the poor due or charity tax. Nothing intrinsically political about that. Number 4 is Sawm, fasting during the holy month of Ramadan. Good luck with trying to prove that as a political act. And the 5th pillar is the Hajj, or the pilgrimage to Mecca, during which time people will often try not to talk about worldly things. They'll often avoid political discussion and keep things focused on the remembrance of God. But again, even if there are political implications, potential possible political implications of that, there is nothing intrinsically political about the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. So yeah, it's really easy, but you have to do it. Don't just ignore it. Explain to them why Islam does belong in a book about world religions. And if you take a course on world religions at any Western university, then you will have to get a textbook on world religions, and Islam will inevitably, invariably be one of the sections or one of the chapters in that book. You know, this is the book that they had in the course syllabus for my first year university class on world religions, but had it been any other textbook, it would have been the same thing. Islam belongs in a textbook on world religions. All of the textbooks on world religions cannot be wrong. Now, some of you will say, Sadat, this is all basic common sense. This is unnecessary. But as I explained before, there is a nefarious political agenda that is linked up with this effort to paint Islam as not a religion, as just a political ideology. Moreover, as recent events in the United States show, crazy ideas can grow. Crazy ideas, when left unchecked, can morph into a monster and can come back and bite you. Who would have thought that we would have seen in our lifetime Capitol Hill being overrun by insurrectionists, by rebels trying to overthrow a democratically elected government or election? Who would have thought that? But the people that we used to laugh at on the internet, that crazy movement left unchecked morphed into a monster. And by the way, this attempted political rebellion and insurrection was not planned in a mosque. So next time you hear someone say that Islam is not a religion, it's just a political system, do not ignore it, do not leave it unchecked, but correct it using this very simple method that I showed you. We owe it not just to ourselves, but we also owe it to our children and our future generations to correct such bad and potentially dangerous ideas. Whether it's correcting people online, whether it's conversations you have with your neighbors, your non-Muslim colleagues at work, you have to try your best. Most people are reasonable, and if you explain things to them in a reasonable way, they will be willing to change or at least modify some of their views and beliefs. Of course, once in a while, there might be someone so crazy and so loony on the other side that you might just not get anywhere talking to them. But we have to try our best. I hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to hit the like button as well as to subscribe and the notification bell. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.